I always like it when Charlie uses the word patience. Him being EMT, I always wonder which one's he talking about. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Anyway, he has patience and he has patience. Work with me, Sierra. She gives me this look of, what? Why is my what? I was studying too hard and it gave in. This is what happens when you use it a lot. I do that also. And I did that one day when it was cold. It didn't come back too well, so now I hold it special. All right, our lesson comes out of 1 Samuel, chapter 1 through 3. And even though this is the introduction to Samuel, I really like the fact that it tells you some background of Hannah. Because you see, without Hannah, there couldn't have been Samuel. Samuel was a prayer answered from this praying woman. Now, how many of us are here today because of some praying woman? For that matter, how many of us are here today because of praying parents whatsoever? It may have been mom, it may have been dad. In the Southern culture, they always want to focus on the mamas, don't they? That kind of bothers me just a little bit, I'll be honest with you. Have you ever noticed on TV, on commercials and everything like that, they always promote the dad as an idiot and the mama knows everything? Have you noticed that? That drives me nuts. I finally saw one commercial the other day. This woman goes in. She's just fussing at her husband for leaving money in his jeans. She goes, you know this is our savings money, da-da-da-da-da. And he just sits there and he listens, and then finally he looks at her and goes, honey, those are your jeans. It's the only time I've ever seen where it played out that the guy was the one that was one up on the female. Because usually, God love them, they don't know how to scramble an egg and everything else. And I'm like, that's just not biblically correct. You know what I'm saying? It's just not Bible. You see, the Bible teaches that it's supposed to be a spiritual head of the male. And that comes out in this story. Let's look, starting with 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse number 10. And after we read these, I'm going to go back and give you just a touch more of the background. And she was in bitterness of soul and prayed unto the Lord and wept sore. All right, that one verse, and then I'm going to stop for a second. When it's talking about it's talking about Hannah. Hannah had a special situation. Hannah was barren. And it talks in the Bible, if you study in the first scriptures of this, we pick up in verse number 10. But the scriptures state that she was barren, and that was actually of God that she was this way. Okay? So understand, in that time period, one of the most prosperous things you could do was have children. When you read over in Psalms, it talks about children being an heritage of the Lord. It's because that's where your prosperity. That was your retirement plan, okay? They had no IRA. It was called KID. Have a kid because that's your retirement plan, okay? And that's how you showed prosperity. Well, Hannah couldn't do that. Now, her husband, Elkanah, I'll call him, you can call him Elkanah, you can call him Elkanah. I'm Hick, it's going to come out however, but it's Elkanah. So Elkanah, he loved, and it talks about how much he loved his wife, Hannah, but he also had to prepare for the future. And as custom was then, if you were married and your wife could not produce offspring, you were to take a second wife. He did this. He married another woman. Anybody know her name? Let me give you a hint. Starts with P, rhymes with Jemima, except it's Nina. Peninnah, okay? So Peninnah was the second wife, and guess what she could do? Man, she could have kids like nobody's business. I won't say that I think she was born and raised anywhere around here, but she had kids like crazy. Nicole, that was really for you to say amen to. No, Anyway, so she could have kids like crazy, and you know what she did? I think she knew that she wasn't loved as much as Hannah. Because what do you think she did with those kids? You know the old phrase that, she threw them right up in Hannah's face all the time, did she not? Constantly, she mocked Hannah, made fun of Hannah, which brings us to verse number 10. Hannah was how? She was very bitter. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but wilt give unto thine handmaid a man child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. It skips from there to verse 15, I think it skips. Because we stopped on 11 and then we picked up on 15. From 11 to 15, it talks about them going to the temple to pray. Now, you have to understand how it worked. They would go in, if you remember the Day of Atonement, they would go one day, a trip every year. We've calculated to be somewhere in September. They would go to the temple, and they would take a sacrifice into the temple. And the priest would bless them. They would pray. They would receive forgiveness of their sins. Well, the way it was aligned, they aligned everything up from what portion of the beef or the cow to the portion of who gets what to how you're supposed to walk even. And the way that they would walk is the husband would walk first. Right behind the husband would be the wife, the first wife, if she had children. Hannah didn't have children. So Hannah was booted to the end of the line. And before Hannah got to walk, Peninnah and her children. And then Hannah. So Hannah was always bringing up the last part. How many of us in our Christian life, we feel like we bring up the rear every time? It seems like every time we turn around, every time we look around, everywhere we go, something happens to kick us while we're down. And it's not like the devil just to get us down. It is just like the devil to kick us while we're down. And he will do that if we let him. And we have a tendency to become bitter. How many of us have that human spirit? I don't deserve this. This isn't fair. Why is this happening? God, why are you doing this to me? And it's not God doing it to you. God might be allowing it because he trusts that you can handle it, but it isn't God doing it. That a lot of people get mixed up on that one. God doesn't cause bad. Now, just because he allows bad, I was having a conversation yesterday with a lady. We went up, and you guys remember Tina that used to come to church with us, the blonde used to live here. Well, Tina has made some wrong choices, and those wrong choices have ended her up in a hospital. And she has a lot of things going bad wrong. She needs a lot of prayer. So we went up yesterday to see her, pray for her. And she was gone for 4.5 hours for dialysis. We never did get to see her. And then after dialysis, because her kidneys have done everything but work, apparently, then they were going on for chest x-rays because the heart's all messed up. And 2 of the valves in her heart have severe infection inside of them. I mean, it's just a big mess from wrong decisions. So we're sitting here talking with her mother. And her mom's, she's holding it together pretty well. She's been going to church and she has peace about it. But I was telling her, it's one thing for us to have faith in God. It's another thing to realize how much faith God has in us. He thinks we can handle a situation or he wouldn't allow it to take place at all. Now, God didn't cause the negative side. God didn't cause the bad stuff to happen. Those are consequences that come through our own decisions. But he allows those negative things because he knows we can deal with it if we rely on him. Not only do we have choices that can lead to bad, but we have choices that can lead to eternity. And we need to realize that. Hannah had some of these same choices. At first, being mocked and made fun of. Don't you know that Peninnah, she probably snarled at her. She gave her that look of, you girls ever done that before to somebody? You get one over on her and like, yeah, whatever. And you keep on walking and you strut just a little bit taller because you know that you're getting a little bit better than what they are. I don't know why Jace is looking at you like that, Sarah. Anyway, I won't point that out. Don't worry. Anyway, wait a minute. I already did. So anyhow, You know what I'm talking about? That Chase, do you know what I'm talking about? You know that look? You've seen that look before? I won't ask where. So, understand, it's probably after she slammed dunks. Anyway, here you have Peninnah and Hannah, both wanting the love and affection of Elkanah, okay? But notice, if you study in these scriptures, it says that Elkanah loved Hannah above everything. He loved her most. And to even show this, when he would take in his sacrifice, you see part of that peace offering that they would give, when the priest would give it up, he wouldn't burn it. The peace offering was prepared and they would partake in it. And when he did that, Elkanah had a habit. He gave Hannah double portions of everything to show to her, look, I love you more. Just because you're this way, I still love you more. Now that's an excellent spiritual head right there. He had to go by tradition. He had to go by how it's supposed to be. Yes, when they walked to the temple, he was in front, and Peninnah was behind him, and the children, and then last was Hannah. But at the same time, he tried his best to do what he could. Now, how many of you husbands have ever tried your best to do what you can to make that wife happy in some way, shape, or form? Absolutely. Every one of you, Chase, you might as well get ready to. It happens. You've got to do whatever it takes, right? And you do that because the Bible teaches that you love that wife as Christ loves the church. Well, look what Christ did for the church. He gave his life for the church, just as a spiritual, godly husband would do for his wife. So here's Hannah. We jump from verse 11 to 15. In the course of 11 to 15, she is in the temple praying. And while she's in the temple praying, the priest that day, y'all remember his name? Give you a hint, it's only 3 letters. Eli. Now, if you remember the stories of Eli, he had 2 sons, not necessarily the pick of the litter. And they were that way because he did not train them correctly. You see, Eli was not so great spiritual head. I believe he was trained thoroughly. I believe at one time in his life that he sought after God. But his children replaced his true love and devotion to God. That's my opinion. You know, sometimes unfortunately that happens with parents. They're good to go. They are dedicated and on fire for God. That child comes along and the child consumes life. And everything they do and say is for the child. Everywhere they go is for the child. Every sacrifice they make is for the child. We need to realize, I was listening to a preacher yesterday, and his sermon was all about the fact that God does come first. Period. God is first. And then the family. And then he went on to say, and when it comes down to my family, my wife comes first, and then my children. That's difficult sometimes for parents, is it not? We see that child's supposed to be, without Jimmy, there would be no Leah. Therefore, Jimmy is first. Without Stellania, there would be no Leah. Therefore, Stellania better be first. You can tell Jimmy I said that later. I'll tell him myself, but you know. When it comes down to it, you have to have, that's how it is laid out in the Bible. And as they walked to the temple, it was the husband, and then it was the wife, and then it was the children. It wasn't the kids go up front. It wasn't, oh, honey, you go on, and I'll bring up the rear and follow you and the kids. We need to realize in today's society, no matter what society wants to tell us, the biblical way is the right way. So here's Hannah. She's praying. She's praying hard. She is pouring out her heart to God. Verse number 15. And Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken therein, or hitherto. Hannah is in the altar praying. She is praying with everything in her. She's got that prayer going on that you start sweating, you're praying so hard. And Eli sees her. And he sees her praying. But the thing and how it's described in Scripture is when he saw her praying, he saw her mouth moving, but he didn't hear anything. You know what? You don't have to produce noise for God to hear your prayer. You don't have to come out and be the loudest one in the group for God to hear your prayer. You can pray silently. You can pray even inside your head, and God knows what you're. It says that He knows your heart. God knows. I don't have to holler it out. I don't have to be the loudest person around. I know most of the time I'm the loudest person around, but I don't have to be. And God can still hear and know my desire. And here's Hannah. She's praying. She's praying. Her mouth is moving. No sound is coming. Eli thinks she's drunk. And that's where she answers back in verse number 15. Let's go on to verse number 17. Then Eli answered and said, "Go in peace." Apparently, he was touched by the Spirit that she was getting a hold of. "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him." And she said, "Let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight." So the woman went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. You remember when I said that she would receive the double portion of that peace offering? They were supposed to take it in. They were supposed to eat it. She wouldn't even eat. She had said, "No, I just," you ever get to the point where you're like, "I don't want to eat. I don't even want to see food. Just get it away from me." Human side. 19, and they rose up in the morning early and worshipped before the Lord and returned and came to their house to Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Wherefore it came to pass when the time was come about, after Hannah had conceived, she bare a son and called his name Samuel, saying, "Because I have asked him of the Lord." Now, we see that she had prayed and she had requested, and what did God do? When God saw that she was serious, then God came in and He gave her the child that she asked for. It didn't take blessings of the priest for her to get that child. It didn't take 15 people praying for her to get that child. It took her being serious with God to get her child. Let's go on to verse number 24. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her, with 3 bullocks, and 1 ephah of flour, and a bottle of wine, and brought him unto the house of the Lord in Shiloh, and the child was young. And they slew a bullock, and brought the child to Eli. Now, there are a few different beliefs on the time of weaning, and I'm just briefly going to touch them. There are actually different times of child being weaned. The first step in that time, the weaning, they didn't bottle feed, okay? So a child would be weaned from their mother and the milk when they were between 2 and 3 years of age. The next part is described that they would be weaned to eat only adult food totally, and that was when they were about the age of 7. Then there came the time of weaning when the kid wasn't around their mom. They were sent out to work with the father. They were sent out to be trained, and that was the age of 12. So Bible scholars have 3 different times that they have discussed on weaning. The typical age of weaning at that time was the age of 12 when they were ready to leave and be trained. So a lot of them do lean heavily to thinking that Samuel was sent to the temple at the age of 12. I'm not saying that's exactly what I think. I'm not saying that's what you should think. I'm saying that you should read this and research it for yourself. Okay? But the Bible says, when she had weaned him. Now, up to the point of weaning the child, however many years it was, she did not go to the temple on that yearly basis. She stayed at the house. She stayed to keep every minute she could with him. She knew what she was going to do. She knew what her promise was, and she was going to be a woman of her word. Let's look at verse number 26. And she said, "O my Lord, as thy soul liveth, my Lord, I am the woman that stood by thee here, praying unto the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord hath given me my petition, which I ask of him. Therefore also I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord." And he worshipped the Lord there. So she shows up to Eli the priest. She had to remind him who she was. That lets me know it was a few years. Because she's like, hey, remember I'm the woman you thought was drunk, remember? Oh, yes, and he remembered her. And then well, here's the child. And I've lent him to the Lord. To lend and work for the Lord then meant you lived in the temple. You stayed at the temple. You never left the temple. So guess what Eli got? He got a big old walking and two-legged present that day. Now, why do you think it was of importance for Eli to receive that child? Start over, why? He needs to train him up? What do you think? She vowed a vow, and she had to hold true to that vow. Just like God gives us promises, and He will always answer our promises, when we make a vow, we need to stick with that vow. Takes his child back. What did we learn just a minute ago about Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas? They were not good. They were absolutely sorry. That's the best way to describe it. They were sorry. That's a couple of sorry kids he had there. Now, whose fault was that, though? Was it just the kid's fault? No. If you leave a child to its own raising, that child is going to raise itself up to be a heathen. Hardly ever do you find one that raises itself up to be just perfect and Christian and going to do the right thing. They are going... Look at what the world has to offer. And if you leave a child to the world to raise, no, the world will definitely raise it. That's why God entrusts parents. That's why we need to step up. That's why we have a difficult job. It's not easy. Anytime after we have to discipline a child, that is not an easy thing. It breaks our hearts, does it not? Sometimes, even when I've had to tend to Leah, even as late as yesterday, I had to get on to her for making a huge mess and then leaving it. And she looked at me and she goes, well, you sound so hateful, which made me sound even more hateful because then we had to talk about her saying anything back to me once I explained how she was going to do something. And then we gave out some consequences that she would be able to choose from if she made that choice again to say anything back to me. After that's done, I felt bad for the next 3 hours. But she took care of her business within 5 minutes flat and was back in her bedroom watching some kind of Disney show. No problem, munching on the popcorn again. I'm in there looking at Jimmy going, what did I fail? What did I do wrong? Did I not train her right? He's like, honey, you're a little high strung. You just need to calm down. You'll be okay. Well, thanks. Anyway, understand it's not an easy... We have a very difficult job as parents. In the end, will it pay off? You betcha it will. Verse 28, as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord, and he worshiped the Lord there. Now we jump to 1 Samuel chapter 3. Now we leave Hannah pretty much. Hannah goes on back to the house. And guess what Hannah's able to do from that point on? She has kids. Because God blesses her because she kept her vow to Him. You can't outdo the Lord. You can't outvow, outpromise, or outdedicate on God's side. You can't. The more you give to Him, the more He's going to give back. The more you bless Him, the more He's going to bless you. The more you put Him first, the more He's going to put you first. However, if we're ever ashamed of Him... Yeah, Bobby?
Do you think if she had not kept her vow that she would have been able to have more children?
No, I do not. And I believe in the end He's taking that child too. Right. I mean, our decisions absolutely affect the consequences of what happens. Just like you remember with David and Bathsheba. David did what he thought to try to make up for things. But because of his decisions, God told him plainly, that child's going to die. And the promise was made that David's entire family would never get away from the sword. Was it not? Was it not? God told that to. And what happened? Followed him. When God speaks it, it'll happen. Go ahead. No, but the Bible, excuse me, the Bible teaches that our consequences, our decisions today will affect for generations down the road. So in your family somewhere, generations later, that consequence will come out. On that part, I don't necessarily see it like that. I'm talking about if this is when y'all help out Charlie, preacher, John, anybody, preacher what. The Bible is very clear in the fact that it says that if you seek Him, then you won't. Oh, sin cannot be allowed. But at the same time, not allowing the sin, judgment will come. Yeah, Sharon. Well, now, even with the generational thing, that's the part that I focus on is the fact that even though, and I know of many things and choices that my family have done in the past and family members that I've never even met, and it seems like even today that I'm paying for what family has chosen. The seat where I know God and God is my refuge. It doesn't matter what that consequence is that's going to be coming my way because I've got God on my side who can forgive, who can forget, and take care of me in that situation. Right. No, and just because my family made wrong decisions, it's well known that at one time, if you went to the Paint Rock area, as soon as you turn on the road in Paint Rock, generations ago, our family owned. Was it not from there all the way up to the cemetery? Isn't that what it was, Stephanie? The entire section belonged to our family. And we got a hold of this one great whatever grandfather that liked to gamble. Okay, because of that, you look now in our family, we do stay a little bit lower than most. We do have to struggle and strive to keep things taken care of. But because of my relationship with God now, those decisions then, even though they do still rear their ugly head now, God sees me through all of it. I don't think that God's going to forsake me because of my relationship with Him. Just like I don't choose, I don't go, I don't even, I've never even purchased a lottery ticket. Okay? That's how anti I am to every bit of that. But at the same time, financial difficulty has followed through generations because that's what the Bible teaches. He does. I don't believe God punishes though. Right. God, I do not believe that God punishes. I believe that God will allow a repeat of a mistake that wasn't learned from until He sees that you have learned from it. Go ahead. That's exactly right. He will. Mhm. The first child did die. And David prayed, he fasted, he did everything spiritually possible for that child's life until the day that it did die. And when it died, he got up, he put on his clothes, he went and he asked for some food because he realized it. But I still, there is who was the leader that was told that he was going to die, and he prayed, and God gave him an additional 15 years. I also think that no matter what, generational, anything like that, no matter what is coming your way, I believe God has the right, I know God has the right to change His mind, to remove from a family situation. Yes, the Bible talks about judgment. The Bible's clear about judgment, but the Bible's also clear about the New Testament and the time of grace and mercy. And the Bible is not going to contradict itself to where if we're living in the time of grace, I believe if I dedicate my whole heart and life to God and I train my family to be how God wants them to be, I believe God is going to honor that. Charlie? Yes, He will. That's right. Yes, and it comes with that whole simple little word of dedication. We have to dedicate ourselves to God. Grady.
grew up with mom, and mom was the person that we could hear about. Not so much. She really wasn't. She made horrible decisions. She did everything she could wrong just now, and that's why we love it. And mom took kids to church and stuff like that, and still she was wrong. And she was wrong. Well, I noticed in myself, and I know people in the spirit that the truth can grow up in traits that you can't do. And I know in my life I made some of the same wrong decisions mom did. She calls her personality or traits. A lot of things because that's what I do. The difference is, for mom, when I was younger, did not really allow us to take anything from her. I did. And though I still made the same wrong decisions and stuff like that, I still knew that somewhere God was going to work it out.
And that's what I'm telling Nicole is the fact that no matter what comes, though, now there is a relationship and a dedication and a working with God to where God, He's a merciful God. And we could easily say that years of smoking by my dad's entire family has transcended down to where I'm having issues with the lung. But at the same time, even if that is true, I know all I have to do is pray and God will take care of this. Mainly your dad.
I know, I'm yelling. My dad yells. I yell at my brother. And I know if it would have been I was at a house where, he talked my thing, and things like this, I would have that learned behavior. But if I love my life, then I'm going to have patience, and I'm going to have love, and I'm going to have that fruit that God wants me to have, no matter if my parents or grandparents or whoever.
That's not really what I was talking about, Nicole. This someone said a long time ago. Satan knows from the day we conceive what our weaknesses is going to be and what our weaknesses is going to be found. And those weaknesses is passed down through satanic influence.
Oh, yeah.
And when people, like my mom, decides to live in that satanic atmosphere, and I'm not mentioning Satan, but it's still being an influence, then that's going to be passed on to me.
See, I don't know if Satan really knows the day I'm born, okay, I'm going to have a problem with the way other women look, I'm going to have a problem with the way other moms are.
Oh, no, he does not know that. He watches. If you'll notice, Satan's always going to try in different avenues throughout your life to see which one trips you up. He's going to try on, dealing with the opposite sex. He's going to try dealing with the same sex. He's going to try, okay, well, let's try some smoking or drinking or something. He's going to keep picking a little bit here and there until he can find what cracks you a little bit. Because when I was scrambling the eggs this morning and I went to crack it, you know where I cracked it? Where it was weak. I went after the section of the shell that was weak. And that's exactly what the devil does to us. I've never had a drinking problem. I've always thought it was the nastiest thing ever. The devil knew he couldn't pull that one on me, so that's not where he tried to work on me at. But at the same time, in other areas, he's always attacked me physically because that will get me down quicker than anything. He knows where to attack. Now, at the same time, as Stephanie's probably about to tell you, our family has one certain trait that drives us crazy and everybody else crazy, and that's attitude mixed with mouth, mixed with claiming anger issues. And you know what? God gives us grace through that. Stephanie, what were you going to say? Mm-hmm. I know she drives me crazy. I mean, yeah. Yeah. They are going to do as you do, not as you say.
In my case, mom didn't write this why we call it brothers and sisters. She was right. Yeah, she went to church. She went to church.
But she didn't live it.
She didn't train us in Christian life. So we were not trained to make godly choices. I mean, mixed in. So we just
See, yours was more of a nurture situation, and then the nature of God had to come in to intervene.
So the difference is started with me making a choice to be a Christian. And though I still make wrong choices, I know that, I get better than mom.
Preacher White. Satan only knows what we tell him. That's exactly right. God knows everything. But I'm telling you that relationship and the dedication with God and knowing that God is a merciful God and we live in the time of grace makes a big difference. You do have to remember that generation after generation thing was written in, what was that? Genesis, and that is in the Old Testament. So I thoroughly believe that we're under the time of grace, and that's New Testament. Charlie?
You ever think that there was a situation of Cain and Abel having Probably not, because they chose to sin, even though they didn't go out and kill somebody, because there was nobody to kill.
Yeah. If they hadn't eaten that fruit.
Sin, and the thing of it is, so many people think that God judges sin, and he has to judge sin, but he does it with a malicious attitude. He does it with a vengeance attitude. I've got to get revenge.
That's right.
When he allows things to come our way, he does it in love. If we start thought about it, the actions that we did wrong,
yep.
God he can make them a lot worse on us than we are. There's not anybody in here that can say that we're not living in the age of grace.
That's right.
Because if we got exactly what we deserve,
we'd all be in hell.
So, we do live in grace. We do make mistakes. God allows us to do this. We have to trust that we're going to pick up and go on the way we dwell in that thought and just be down the rest of our life until we die.
That's right. Since our time has come to an end fairly quickly, this was one of the best Sunday school classes, by the way. I love it when y'all get in there and get involved and give what you think and your interpretation of Bible and stuff. Please do that more. I learn so much more when you do that. Okay? Yes, ma'am. That's right. That's dedicating everything to God, getting self out of the way. Next week, we are going to be talking a little bit more about Samuel's ministry being established. So I will bring in what we didn't get covered, because we are going to start with him living in the temple and how God speaks to him the first time. But our golden text, it comes from 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 10. The Lord came and stood and called as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel answered, Speak, for thy servant heareth. And that's 1 Samuel 3 and 10. Once again, thank you so very much for coming to Sunday school.